In the previous 3 talks on the Heart Sutra, we have actually covered some of the most important topics related to the Heart Sutra. So let us now put them together in a summary. First of all, the Heart Sutra is concerned with our life, your life. Let us take a moment to reflect on your life. Are you happy with your life? Are there suffering, unhappiness, situations that occur over and over again? Do you want to be happier? Do we know what is true happiness? And if there is, how do we get there? That is what the Heart Sutra is concerned with. So we want to have a happy life, but it's happiness that will last, happiness that will be satisfying. Yet the reality is that we all encounter dukkha, we all encounter suffering, various degrees of dissatisfaction, unhappiness. So to go from here to there, from dukkha to sukha, how do we do that? The way we do that is that we need a method, we need a tool, and that tool, that method is called Prajna wisdom. We want to understand Prajna wisdom in order to go from dukkha to sukha. So Prajna wisdom, where do we start? What is it about? It is foremostly about understanding ourselves, understanding yourself, understand your true nature. So this is not a new idea. Many different cultures have that idea. That wisdom begins with understanding yourself. The ancient Greeks have also famously said, know thyself. And that's exactly where we start. Want to be happy? We need to know ourselves first. Now, the Prajna wisdom from the Buddha tell us something about the nature of who we are. And he says, the self is empty. Now, that is an unusual way to talk about the self. So we have briefly explained the 3 characteristics of what that means, so 3 angles to see that the self is empty. One is impermanence, the second is interdependence, and the third is incomplete control or incomplete ownership. So this teaching of emptiness of the self can be surprising, can be shocking even. But if we examine the idea of emptiness in detail, actually there's a lot of common sense in there. For example, impermanence of the self. If we just take a moment and we see that that's common sense. I change, my body change, my feelings change, my ideas change, how I feel about something change, my knowledge change, the way I look at this world also change. Yeah. So while we see this fairly easily, many people do not realize the deep impact that understanding the emptiness of the self has. And we may not realize that many things we do, many things we think about, we fail to apply the idea of emptiness or impermanence to how we interact, how we react, how we live our life. For example, waste not fresh tears over old griefs is a saying that from different cultures, we have all come to realize something similar. Do not cry over old, sad experiences. That's about impermanence. That reflects the truth of impermanence. Yet how often we hold on to old griefs, failing to realize that we should apply impermanence, the understanding of impermanence in such situations. Albert Einstein also said, the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. That is also about the truth of impermanence. And in fact, it looks at impermanence in a very positive way. The measure of intelligence is the ability to change. So, from impermanence of the self, we should learn that we should not dwell on the past. We should also learn that we can change. And that also means that we don't need to unnecessarily limit ourselves. That means we have potential to grow, to change, to become better. Yet how often we tend to get into a mode of fixed thinking about who we are, what I can do, what I cannot do. So the understanding of impermanence, the deep understanding of impermanence is very useful in the part of understanding who we are. And in interdependence, that is also not a new idea. We also find that in different cultures. For example, there's a saying, if nature suffers, we suffer. If nature prospers, we prosper. Now, isn't that an expression of interdependence? How we, both body and mind, are interconnected with the rest of the world. And so what happens to the world, what happens to others, affect us. What happens to us, affect others. So we would naturally want the whole world or other people to be better as well, not just ourselves. So interdependence brings us an understanding, a broader perspective of how we live in this world. We begin to care not for just ourselves, but for others, for other living beings, and for our environment. Then we get a step closer to understanding ourselves. So the deep understanding of interdependence of the self brings about beauty of partnership and interactions. And if we truly understand it, we are actually never alone, never lonely. And we should understand that the self is integrated into this world. And the third aspect, the incomplete control or incomplete ownership of the self, we also find that concept or that insight in other cultures. For example, control what you can, ignore the rest. That is a very nice expression of incomplete ownership. You probably have heard of the serenity prayer In Christianity, it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. A beautiful expression and understanding of incomplete ownership, which is a fact about the self, about each person. And that when we understand this deeply and remember it, it will affect the way we interact with things that happen to us in our lives. And that indeed, to be able to know the difference between what we can change or what we cannot change is wisdom. So incomplete control also means that while we accept things we cannot change, we could also think about ways to change what we can change. What does it take to change what we can change? So that is also part of the understanding of the self and understanding of the world and understanding of life. Yeah. So that impermanence, interdependence, and incomplete control together are all facts about the nature of who we are. And when we can put them together, then we will realize many things about ourselves. For example, eliminating the ego is a powerful thing. And we should also understand that the self, ourselves, is a self that has unlimited potential. It is not a fixed thing. It is not something that doesn't change. It's not something that is independent. It's something that is interconnected with others. It's something that is naturally, or the self, when we understand ourselves better, we become naturally compassionate. So we will go into more details about all these aspects of the self in the later part, the Heart Sutra. So now that is an important and profound understanding of the self, the emptiness of the self. Now, that understanding, that deep understanding is prajna, prajna wisdom. So, question, how do we achieve this realization of prajna? Well, the Heart Sutra told us, deeply immerse in Prajna Paramita. So while we have a sort of a reading knowledge or listening knowledge, understanding of the self, the emptiness of the self, we need to immerse ourselves in that understanding. Now, we have explained that one way to get deeply immersed in something is to follow the three modes of wisdom: listening wisdom, thinking wisdom, and cultivation wisdom or practice wisdom. So we not only listen to the teaching or read about the teaching, we want to internalize it. We want to think about it. We want to go through it in our mind and make sure we understand. We want to be able to bring up examples to validate what we have learned. We want to be able to explain to others to make sure we know what we're saying. And we want to be able to apply this impermanence, interdependence, incomplete control into how we live our life. That's called cultivation. It's called a practice, right? So that is the beginning of getting deeply immersed in prajna. So it's a body and mind total involvement. We live our life with this understanding. We live every aspect of our life with this understanding. And as we do so, through listening wisdom, through thinking, through practice, we gain a deeper and deeper understanding of prajna. It's not just a superficial reading knowledge. We gain actual deeper realization of what prajna is about. And we learn to live our life with prajna as opposed to how we used to live our life. We begin to change these old habits and old habits of thinking and old habits of feeling and reacting that make us suffer. Okay. So the change starts with ourselves. We start by changing ourselves. Prajna is all about changing ourselves, changing the way we view ourselves, changing the way we view the world. Now, is that it? It's about changing ourselves? Well, no, it's more than that. Prajna wisdom also has the power to change the world. But we only talked about changing ourselves, how we look at ourselves, how we understand ourselves, how we interact and live our life in this world. How do we go about to change the world? Well, it starts with applying the prajna understanding, and then our life becomes happier. Our suffering diminishes. We begin to experience real peace of mind. And when we do that, we begin to affect the people around us. We begin to show people how is it possible to live life in a different way. And we can also actively share our experiences, our wisdom, our insights, our understanding with others. So then gradually we begin to make an impact in our circle of friends and acquaintances. And if, like Shifu does, we devote our lives to the teaching and the practice of prajna wisdom, then our job, our career is to show people how to apply this prajna wisdom in your lives. That's making a change. So look at the Buddha. The Buddha taught us how to know yourself, how to understand the suffering and turn that into sukha, turn that into bliss. And by doing so, he changed the world. So much so that thousands of years later, millions and millions of people still follow the Buddha's teaching and gain great, profound insight from it. So if we want to change the world, we begin by changing ourselves. If we want to change ourselves, we begin by understanding ourselves. And that's exactly what a bodhisattva does. The bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, that's what the bodhisattva does. We have learned also that the bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the name Avalokiteshvara has two meanings. One is to contemplate on true freedom. And that is the same as saying to know yourself. We are suffering. That means we're not free. We want to be free, want to be happy. We need to know ourselves. And that's the prajna wisdom. So contemplate the true freedom. And then once the bodhisattva has a deep understanding of it, has a deep realization of prajna, and is able to set himself free, the bodhisattva started to teach. So perceiving the Christ of the world, begin to see how people of this world are suffering, are unhappy because they don't understand themselves, because they misunderstand who they are and they misunderstand other people. And then people begin to do things to hurt each other. over and over again, look through our history, people continue to make the same mistakes. People continue every generation to misunderstanding, to get confused about who they are, what our true nature is. So using the same understanding, teaching others, that's what Bodhisattva does. So Bodhisattva now is showing us Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, while deeply immersed in Prajna Paramita. Now, by teaching others, many others, countless others, the Prajna wisdom, that is called Paramita. That is the practice of turning Prajna into Prajna Paramita. And that is the perfection of wisdom. Why? Because Prajna is the true wisdom to understand the nature of ourselves and the nature of phenomena. And when we teach others, we need to think about all the different ways to express that teaching. We need to become very skillful in helping others because everybody's different and they may need different expressions, different examples, different ways to lead them to help themselves, to save themselves. So the second aspect of prajna is how to apply that in our goal to help others skillfully. That when we become extremely skillful, then we achieve the perfection of wisdom. So that is the Prajna Paramita. So that above summary is the core of Prajna Paramita. What is about, how to practice. The core is the heart. So that is what the Heart Sutra is about. Now, there's a couple more things we should like to talk about in addition. One is the heart of anything, the core of anything. So when we learn about Prajna Paramita or the wisdom of life, we want to get to the core first, the essence. And we have tried to summarize that just now. But we can apply this idea to anything that we learn in life. Whatever you learn in life, whatever knowledge you want to acquire, whatever skill, you can also think about what is the core there. So if you want to play piano really well, what is the core of the piano practice so I can play it well? Do I understand? Can my teacher tell me? If you want to become good in math, what is the core of algebra? What is the core of geometry, calculus? If you want to be a politician to serve the people, what is the core of government or political system? What is the core of this political system? What is it aimed to do? Is the setup faithful to its goal, its intention? What is the core of school education? Do we need educational reform? If we want to reform, what are we trying to achieve? What is the core of school education? And what is the core spiritual practice? What Shifu has just explained, the core Prajna Paramita, the Heart Sutra, is indeed the core of the Buddhist spiritual practice. But when we say spiritual practice, it's not just about leaving this world and going to some mountains and then do your spiritual practice. It's very much about living your everyday life as well. In Buddhism, the spiritual practice is never separated from everyday life. So what is the core of the Buddhist practice? The spirituality. That is something useful to think about. That is enough for this talk. We'll continue next time to explore the wonderful and profound world of wisdom with Prajna Paramita. Now, let us close our eyes and review what we have learned today. In the previous 3 talks, we talked about what is the Heart Sutra, what is Prajna Paramita, what is the Dharma teaching, and why we should study the Heart Sutra. We also talked about the idea of a bodhisattva. To us, the bodhisattva is a role model in life, somebody who's very compassionate in helping others. But in order to really effectively help others, we need to understand ourselves. And the wisdom to understand ourselves is called prajna. So the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara exemplify that. Why? What is the name Avalokiteshvara mean? How does all of this come together? What is prajna? How is it related to knowing yourself? And why do we need to know ourselves? How does knowing ourselves benefit us? And how does it benefit others? And once we know ourselves really well, we understand the emptiness of the self. Why is that a positive thing? And how do we become skillful in sharing that deep insight with others? That is what the Heart Sutra is about.